we have an interviewer, and she's called Ebony. We have in our second season of our podcast, American Roots, and I want to introduce Ebony Novakowski. So she's defined herself as self-motivated librarian technician with 10 years of experience in academic libraries, with 8 years of specialization in Canadian copyright law, certificate in human resources management, and workshop facilitator with good communication skills, who is active engaged with 2SLGBTQIA plus community. So thanks, Ebony, for this time, for share with us, because sometimes we don't know how can we start talking about this topic, because we know this is a sensitive topic. And we have some questions to you, and I would like to start. So what was your experience like finding a workplace where you felt comfortable and included as a member of the LGBTQIA plus community?
So it was complicated, as most things are when you identify as a minority or someone outside of the social norms. Most things when you're navigating work and life and career are complicated. Now that I'm older and times have gone in a more positive direction, I have found a workplace where I can be my authentic self, and I can use my privilege to give other people in my community a space and make space for others at the table to have a voice, and to engage and be their full and authentic selves in the workplace. But I started out in hospitality. I worked at hotels when I was very young, and it was fairly queer positive. But then I got a job in tech industry, and it was not very queer positive. I decided to leave that job. I did internet moderation. So what I would do is I would look at comments on businesses and corporate websites. And if they were in line with the user policy, I could approve them. But if they weren't, I had to deny them. And at that time, there weren't a lot of social media protections for the queer community. So I decided to quit my job after one day, 8 hours. 8 hours of just people threatening to kill people like me. And I had to approve them because it wasn't against that company, that corporate policy. If the death threats weren't against a specific individual, if they didn't name the person, it was okay to approve that material. And I couldn't. It was so scary. And it hurt me a lot. So I've seen that side of like not being in an inclusive environment, not having an employer that protects you or offers you a seat at a table from that perspective. And then when I was in post-secondaries, you have the opportunity to either be a person that has a voice, or you can just be, an employee and do your best. What we want to make sure is that everybody has the opportunity to be part of the workforce here and be able to bring their best self, whether that is a professional version or someone that's a little bit more personal and brings their own advocacy and their personality to the table. And creating those workspaces benefits everyone, because I can tell from what everyone's wearing here, everybody has different style, everybody has different personality. And that's kind of what DEI is about, is letting people express their own authentic self to whatever degree they want to. It's consent-based, right? It's about how much of yourself you want to bring to the table.
So, sorry. So, as you mentioned that you quit your job after one day.
After a day.
Yeah.
That's breaking.
But now, for example, you are working here for, I think, more than 5 years or around.
Yeah.
So I think it's because you feel comfortable here. They have the policies, they have some rules maybe. Yeah.
So
or how do you feel?
I do feel comfortable here. That we do have some really good policies at RRC Polytech, but things keep changing, right? Like when I talk about my tech job, I was actually in that job for 3 years, but I decided to go back to school and quit that job after one day. I said, I can't do this forever. I can't do this anymore. But, and it was that one defining day, and I'll remember it. But here, if you look at what's happened with Facebook, they've taken away protections for my community members. Now you can make threats against us on those platforms, and you didn't used to be able to up until just about a month ago. It was against their user policies. They would take them down if you reported those comments. So one of the things I'm working with my group here, I work with other gender and sexual diverse allies, advocates, and people in the college community. We're going to make a policy for our accounts, our social media accounts here at RRC Polytech, that we will remove those comments from our accounts if they come up. So we will provide a protective online space for members of the 2SLGBTQIA community, because that's on us to do now, because the platforms are not going to do it. So things can change. Even if you're at an organization that has good policies, it's not about like we made one good policy and then it stays. It's completely evolving. You know, it used to be LGBT community, right? We have many more letters, many more colors of the rainbow, many more different people. So
actually, we have some doubts about this.
Not one and it's not one and done. We continue to grow and evolve as humans, and our community continues to grow and evolve as well. So I think that if you are, that's part of DEI as well, because it's changing. You can't just consult one person and say, we've done the work, we put the policy into place, everybody's good now. It's continually changing and evolving because society continues to change and evolve.
Great. So yes, so I have another question for you, Ebony. What do you think would help create a more inclusive and supportive work environment for the 2SLGBTQIA plus community?
I'm trying to do it. So again, I think social media policies are really important right now, because a lot of those platforms are out of the States where we see rights being scaled back. I think workshops and events that allow people to celebrate themselves. Some of the things we see around the college are like celebrations of Diwali and celebrations of Christmas and celebrations of holidays. There's no reason Pride can't be included in that. That's important to my community.
As Ebony mentioned, college are promoting DEI for 2SLGBTQIA+, like the Pride Month that normally celebrating on June. And also, college are celebrating or having conferences, activities, events. Like this coming March, we will be having a conference for Inclusion Week. One of the topic will be about 2SLGBTQIA+. And now we're going to the interview.
Yay! Thanks for all of this. And we have just a couple of more questions. So, Leona, too.
So, what do you wish more people understood about being in a 2SLGBTQIA plus community?
So this question is really personal to me, because what I wish people understood about the queer community is that the thing that I wish people understood about the queer community has honestly nothing to do about me being queer. It's about how much people in the queer community do for other communities and other people in the community. Me and my mom have a kidney condition. We're chronically ill. My mom's needed an organ transplant. I will need an organ transplant in the future. So one of the things I do with my mom is we fundraise for organ donation and research in that area. I have a friend who's an artist. His sister has a mental disability, and he uses his art to raise funds so that her group home can buy a van. I have family members and friends to take care of in my community. I'm a library worker. I advocate for public funding for libraries and resources to support libraries in the community. I can't do that when I have to be protesting for just my right to be a human and to exist in society. When you take time away from queer people to have to make a case to be included in society, that's time you're taking away from your own community, from people that are helping their communities, for people that are working. We don't take anything away from other people. If me and my wife can't get a bank account because the policy of a bank is to not allow us to get a bank account because we're two women together, then I'm getting a bank account. I'm not taking bank accounts away from other people. It just means I can't do my banking in society, which means that every time I have to make a payment, I inconvenience that person in customer service because I don't have a bank account. It means that every time I engage in a process in society, it's harder for me. It's also harder for the person dealing with me to deal with me. When you hurt our community, you hurt all of society, you hurt the wider society. And I wish people knew that about DEI and about the queer community as well, because it's about giving people a seat at the table. It's not about taking seats away from other people.
Just so what you say, it's more like try to find this equity in the society for all of us.
Yeah, and by giving that to someone, you're not taking it away from
Yeah.
somebody else. And I think that that's something that people don't always understand. They think, these people are coming to take our jobs. No, we want our own jobs. And because of the way Canada works anyways, if I'm not allowed to have a job, you're paying for my unemployment. You're paying for me to be a not productive member of society.
Yeah.
Why do I have to fight so hard to be a productive member of society? When we build equity and equality into a workplace, we make it so that people can be their own productive members of society, and that benefits everyone. And it's really exciting to be a part of.
So my question is there any law as a legally law enforcement in Canadian courts that against this discrimination?
Yeah, so in Canada, we have the Human Rights Code of Canada, and that protects certain groups of people against discrimination. An example of this is your employer is not allowed to ask in an interview, like if a woman is about to, or thinking about being pregnant, because then they could be like, well, I think you're going to take mat leave, so I'm going to not hire you. So there is protection and legislation for queer people in the same regard. If you ask me about my sexuality, you can't discriminate me on that basis. In general, a lot of the problems we see with workplaces are more along the lines of exclusion, bullying, and harassment. That isn't as specifically in the legislation, which is why DEI is important, which is why we talked about how events are important to the community, because it makes space for everyone to be included and breaks down barriers and prevents bullying and harassment, because that can be a really hard thing to fight in a workplace, especially if you are the only one of your community there. But we do have legislation in place that prevents discriminating against queer people who are seeking employment. So that is helpful. Same for housing and other things like that, so that we have access to the same basic human rights as our other productive members of society and just human beings in general in Canada. But it is something that has been added, I would say, within the last 20 years to our government, and we see in other countries protections like that being rolled back. So just because we do have those protections now doesn't mean it's there for forever.
Yeah, it's good to hear, because here is these kind of policies for protecting the people's rights. So, but there are some countries, unfortunately, there is no any rules and regulations about this discrimination on the working places. Yeah. For
Yeah.
example, I will take my country, of course. In India, there is no any regulations about against this discrimination, because I read a lot of, because like in my previous study, I read politics, so I don't read any kind of article against this discrimination.
Mm.
Yeah.
And you know that's probably something that people like me in your country spend their time trying to struggle against and trying to advocate for. And I wonder what those people would be doing for your country if they didn't have to fight so hard to be a part of it.
Yeah.
One
It's
thing
true.
that I want to highlight, for example, here, because I never say that in Latin America, or at least in Peru, it's that the prime minister or the minister of health here, it's a queer person.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it's like, okay, this is a big step.
Yeah. It's true.
It's a big step. Yeah.
It's true.
Because I think that is the first.
Yeah.
The
Well,
first person here.
Winnipeg had the first queer mayor in all of North America.
Yeah, it's so
So yeah, Canada
Big
is
step.
is really kind of groundbreaking in its first for queer people. It's an exciting time to be alive, but you know, queer.
However, you will still have to fight for some rights.
You still have to fight
Yeah.
for some rights, and then also too, not everybody will. Number one, not everybody obeys the law, and this is any law, not just human rights laws, right? So you are always struggling against that, and then also too, you can have a very positive leader, such as the health minister or whatnot, that is, you know, saying like we need to be better, we need to do good things. But then you can have doctors or clinics or provinces or areas of the country that are just like, no, we're not doing it. And then how do you break down that resistance? Well, you bring in more people, you bring in more advocates, but all of this takes time, it takes money. And it takes work, and that's work that a lot of my community members and a lot of marginalized people in general have to do, that people who are straight, cisgendered, white don't have to do this work. They can just exist.
Yeah,
That's
true.
It's true.
Even for us, we came from a minority,
Yeah.
a different minority, but yeah,
And
it's true. We have to struggling with different things, and as you say, just probably white people just has to live.
yeah.
That's all.
And the thing is, if you had that time, if you can think about a time where you struggled, where you really had to like put energy into making a case for yourself, or you had to fight some form of harassment, or you had to make somebody understand, sit there and explain something to them, so that they would understand your perspective and your point of view, what would you have done with that energy or that time? Would you have made a good memory for yourself? Would you have helped a family member? Where would that energy have gone? One of the things that has happened in Manitoba quite recently is there were a lot of protests around queer story times in libraries happening. That happened in Manitoba about 3 years ago, right after the pandemic. Maybe only 2, but there were a lot of protests. People didn't like the fact that library had queer story times for kids. Now, nobody would make the kids come to this. It was only parents who wanted to bring this, and you have to understand that queer people are parents too.
Yeah, sure.
You know, like we have kids, we deserve representation, we deserve stories about us.
Yeah.
We deserve to be able to go into a library and see books that tell stories about us. But a lot of people got very mad about this, very upset. And a lot of people who work in libraries had to spend their time going to meetings, writing letters, going to protests, having people come into the library space and be disruptive and be derogatory and be rude and be violent about this issue. And that's very unfortunate, because those librarians, those people that were doing that behavior, those librarians did programming for their kids. So there were no craft times, there were no regular story times, because the librarians were spending all their time, you know, having to deal with people who were angry. You're taking away, you're hurting yourself, you're hurting your own community. I don't understand that mentality. And we don't understand that like discrimination hurts everybody. Like the white cisgendered men, they think people are trying to take from them in some cases, but they don't see that when they fight against people who have different views and different perspectives, they're taking away from themselves. Because, you know, that dad that was mad about his kids who didn't have to go to a queer story time unless he brought them there, they did not have to go. He comes in, so he's not with his kids. He's not spending time with them. So he took time away from them. The librarian can't do their favorite programming, maybe like animal sleepovers where like kids bring their stuffed animals to the library, and then so he doesn't get to see that. He doesn't get to have that memory. He doesn't get to have that experience because the librarian can't do it because the librarian's dealing with him. So not only he took time on a weekend to go complain that he could have been spending with his kid, but now the librarian is spending time dealing with him, can't do the programming. You know, resistance to this type of ethos has a domino effect, and it impacts everyone negatively. But when we include people, it doesn't take anything away from anyone.
Everything is just in peace and in harmony.
Well, not always. There's a lot of discourse, and like I said, you can't one and done it because you know, we've added, like when we I don't want to say add identity terms, but when people have new identity terms, you know, that's something we discuss as community members, who's part of the queer community and who's not part of the queer community. And like, those are hard discussions to have, and sometimes people feel excluded, and sometimes there can be hurt feelings and there can be disagreements. We have lots of disagreements within our own community. So it's not all peace and harmony. It's constantly working to make that peace and harmony, to make that inclusivity. And it's something that we have to do all the time. And then people are like, oh, just add in another letter. And it's like, no, like it's a lot of work. It's a lot of discussion. It's a lot of discourse. People have strong feelings and opinions about these things. But at the end of the day, it's about working with your community or working with your workplace or working with your family to build that acceptance. It is.
Thanks, Ebony. Actually, it brings me a lot of questions. Well, I have to reflect on this. But thanks for this interview. Thanks for this time and opportunity to talk about this.
You're
Because
welcome.
It's new, not new at all, that we understand different things now.
Well, thank you for taking the time to learn with me today and to let me speak. It's been wonderful meeting all of you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.